All right, literal equations, let's go. I like to think of literal equations as sort of the origami of the algebra world. Basically, someone is going to give you an equation with a couple of different variables, and you are going to solve for each variable. So they might give you an equation with an x and a y, and at one point you'll solve for y, and at another point you'll solve for x. I think the best way for you to look at this is just to watch me do a couple of them, okay? So some people think of it as sort of formulas, and that's exactly what we're going to start with here. The formula for perimeter is P equals 2L plus 2W. Perimeter is twice the length plus twice the width. That's not news to you. So what I'm going to do right now is just rewrite that formula in terms of y. And that's the language they use, which makes it sound fancy, but it just means get W alone. So I'm going to say again what they say. They say rewrite the formula in terms of W. And that's just fancy algebra talk for, hey, get the W alone. And so for some of you, this is going to be like no big deal, a piece of cake. Ooh, I just duplicated that. I didn't really mean to do that. For some of you, that's going to be no big deal, a piece of cake. I can get that alone. And for others of you, you're going to struggle a bit with sort of the piece that is the algebra. So we're really going to sort of flesh out any confusion you have in solving equations here. So I'm supposed to get the W alone, which disappeared for me. So the W is right here. I'm trying to get that alone. So just like in a normal equation where I'm trying to get the variable chunk alone, it's basically the same thing. So I'm going to subtract. I'm really having technical issues today. I'm going to subtract the 2L, because that's the chunk that's kind of in the way from both sides. I'm then going to get P minus 2L equals 2W. My goal, again, was to get the W completely alone. So I need to then divide by 2. So I'm going to divide every term by 2. I'm going to write this in two different ways just to show you that literal equations can look very different and still have correct answers. So the 2 obviously crosses out on one side. So I can get W equals P over 2 minus, and now I want you to look at this really carefully, these 2 cross out too, minus L. Some people prefer to leave it as all one big giant fraction, and so they'll write W equals P minus 2L over 2. Because this little piece over here reduces, do you see that? That reduces. I usually like to have it this way, but I will definitely accept either one. All right, so let's get this thing underway. Okay, let's try another one. Now find the width. If the length is 6 and the perimeter is 24 inches. So if I take that equation that I just did, which was W alone, so it was W equals, I think it's L plus, what is it? W equals P minus 2 over L. Sorry. My focus today is a little weak. So now I'm supposed to find the width if the length is 6 and the perimeter is 24. So what that means is I'm just going to pop in 24 for perimeter. Everyone see that right there? And 6 for my length. And it's much better if it's in the right colors, right? So we can follow it through. So 24 over 2 is 12, and 12 minus 6 is 6. So I know my width is 6 inches. And that's the point of getting it alone, is we could have plugged it in that original equation up here and solved, but it would have been a lot more work than just isolating the W and then plugging in. So you kind of see the point of literal equations. So let's look at the area of a square and talk about that formula. So I feel like if I'm writing in white here, it would be helpful. So an area of a square is just side times side, or side squared. Okay, I'm going to write it both ways here just so that I haven't confused a bunch of you. So area is going to be equal to one side times the other side, but we know those sides are the same. It's a square. So S times S is equal to S squared. So if they ask you to put the area of a square in terms of S, that means they're saying get the S alone, which seems a little bit scary because you're like, how do I get that 2 alone? But it's really not any kind of big deal at all. You are just going to take the square root of the S squared, right? because that will free the s up, and it is the square root of a. And if you think about this, this makes sense, right? Because square root of 25 is 5. The length of one side is s. Okay, friends, this is the real deal. This is the sort of most important part of literals, because later when we get to linears, you need to be able to isolate m's, you need to be able to isolate x's, and you need to be able to isolate b's. Like, you have to be able to isolate all this stuff. So this equation that you're seeing up here in the right corner is a super duper important equation. It is the equation for all linears. And you probably saw this last year. I hope you did, but if you didn't, no worries. But m is our slope. So we're going to take that equation written up there and we're going to get m alone. So I'm going to go ahead and write it here. Y equals mx plus b. And I am going to solve for m, or I'm going to get m alone. I'm going to start by putting my little line down the middle so I know what's where. And I am going to try to get that chunk alone. So again, I always think of this as like, okay, that's the chunk I want alone. So what do? I subtract, oh, I'm writing in highlighters still. I subtract b from both sides. I want to get the mx alone, so I subtract b. I end up with y minus b equals mx. And then my final step would be to divide everything by x, so that I get, I'm going to write in white below, m equals, right, because this will cross out, y minus b over x. Now you'll notice that I didn't break it out into separate pieces because there's nothing to reduce. So that is good enough like it is. Alrighty, now we're going to do the exact same thing, but this time we're going to solve for x. So we take the exact same equation, y equals mx plus b. I'm going to throw down my line down the middle, and I'm going to solve for x. I'm getting the x chunk alone. Again, I always just think of it as a chunk. I'm trying to get this chunk alone. So what do? I get rid of the b. So I'm going to subtract b. I get y minus b equals mx. I want to get the x alone, and the x is multiplying by the m, so I'm going to divide by m. My final answer, because the m's cross out, is x is equal to y minus b all over m. And again, I can't reduce it, so there's no benefit to splitting it out, so that is a fine answer. All right, moving right along. This is our last one. We're just going to solve for x here. So, same idea. I'm looking to free up this x. So generally, I want to get that chunk alone first, but there is no extra stuff around the term. The term is stuck with this whole thing. So I'm going to put my focus on this 3. I want to get the 3 gone so that I can do the rest of this. So how am I going to do that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to know that I'm dividing by 3. The opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. I get 3m equals x minus y. Now to get the x alone, I'm just going to add y. So my final answer is 3m plus y equals x. And some people will write it x equals 3m plus y. Either way is correct.